Hello, all. This is And Why. You are listening to or watching the Bible reading series. If you have not watched the very first episode, please do so. There's a disclaimer. And then moving forward to the Lord's Prayer. Matthew 6, 9 through 13, King James Version. After this manner, therefore, pray ye. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, in earth, as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever. Amen. Genesis 10, King James Version. Heading is Descendants of Noah. Now these are the generations of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and unto them were sons born after the flood. The sons of Japheth, Gomer, Magog, Madai, and Javan, and Tubal, and Meshech, and Tiras. And the sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz, and Riphath, and Togarmah. And the sons of Javan, Elishah, and Tarshish, Kittim, and Dodanim. By these were the isles of the Gentiles divided in their lands, every one after his tongue, after their families and their nations. And sons of Ham, Cush, and Mizraim, and Phut, and Canaan. And the sons of Cush, Seba, and Havilah, and Sabta, and Ramah, and Sabteca, and the sons of Ramah, Sheba, and Dedan. And Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one in the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord, wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, and Erech, and Akkad, and Calneh, and the land of Shinar. Out of that land went forth Asher, and builded Nineveh, and the city of Rehoboth, and Calah, and Racin between Nineveh and Calah, the same as a great city. And Mizraim begat Ludim, and Anamim, and Lehabim, and Nephtahim, and Pathrusim, and Casluhim, out of whom came Philistim, and Caphtorim. And Canaan begat Sidon, his firstborn, and Heth, and the Jebusite, and the Amorite, and the Girgasite, and the Hivite, and the Archite, and the Sinite, and the Arvadite, and the Zemarite, and the Hamathite, and afterward were the families of the Canaanites spread abroad. And the border of the Canaanites was from Sidon, as thou comest to Gerar, unto Gaza, as thou goest unto Sodom and Gomorrah, and Admah, and Zeboim, even unto Lasha. These are the sons of Ham, after their families, after their tongues, in their countries, and in their nations. Unto Shem also, the father of all the children of Eber, the brother of Japheth, the elder, even to him were children born. The children of Shem, Elam, and Asher, and Arphaxad, and Lud, and Aram. And the children of Aram, Uz, and Hul, and Gether, and Mosh. And Arphaxad begat Salah, and Salah begat Eber. And unto Eber was born two sons. The name of one was Peleg, for in his day was the earth divided, and his brother's name was Joktan. And Joktan begat Almadad, and Sheleph, and Hazarmaveth, and Jerah, and Hadaram, and Uzal, and Diklah, and Obal, and Abimael, and Sheba, and Ophir, and Havilah, and Jobab. All these were the sons of Joktan. And their dwelling was from Mesha, as thou goest unto Zephyr, a mount of the east. These are the sons of Shem, after the families, after their tongues, in their lands, after their nations. These are the families of the sons of Noah, after the generations in their nations. And by these were the nations divided in the earth after the flood. That ends the reading of Genesis 10. Getting tongue-tied there with all the names. I probably phonetically butchered all of that, and I apologize to anyone who's listening that knows how to pronounce those names. It'd be kind of surprising in my opinion. However, I mean, I guess it is Hebrew, so that is something to add. These genealogies sometimes are kind of rough to get through, at least in my opinion, but they do show a chronological event of what's going on. But we have some issues, which I put together a small slide to kind of get through some of this. I didn't finish it because there is a lot more that I wanted to get into, which, as you can see, there's more things that I could do. I'm only going to go over the map and then who is Nimrod, because there's more content in that than I even expected. And I'm not even hitting, there's another one individual that the Bible kind of like opens up a little bit on. But let's tap into just a map real quick here. This is the Mesopotamian land, 1200 BC. There were earlier ones. I was trying to find some good maps. They're kind of hard to come by, in my opinion. At least free ones online. Hopefully this is not copyright. I didn't check that, but let's not worry about it in this moment. So we have Babylon, Assyria, the Hittites, Egypt, and the Canaanites come from this area over here where modern day Jerusalem is, hence the debacle. However, one of the things is, and this one doesn't actually show it, and why I was saying like it's so hard to find a good map, Nineveh is over here. So whenever you think of Nineveh, it's over here next to this mountain range, at least in this this time period. As you can see, Babylon's coming up from the Fertile Crescent. You have the Assyrians, the Hittites. Anyways, enough on that. Who was Nimrod? Now, I looked up a couple of websites, and I'm just going to go over two and then reference another one, both of which, one is the Torah and one is the Chabad. So both of them are, I guess, influenced by a Hebrew or Israeli perspective, I guess you could say that. However, I don't know the owners of these websites, but it's just kind of me guessing at these things. This is what Torah.com says. A number of phrases in the passage are difficult to interpret. So this whole thing is rather hard to interpret even for them. One of the things that I read that I don't even have written down is that I think it's like chapter 7 to about 13-ish or 12, or they kind of agree that it's not actually a part of the original text. That doesn't mean that it's not accurate or necessary to be in here, but the fact that it like breaks off and starts talking about Nimrod here is unusual first and foremost, but secondarily, the writing there is off a little bit, according to some individuals. Now, once again, I'm not going to attempt to say that doesn't make it worth our time. I still think it does. The next is this word here, which is in the text when it says, "And he began to be a mighty one in the earth." This phrasing here, that word that's in there, mighty, Gibor, the noun can mean anything from giant to hero to mighty man, warrior to champion to man of power to potentate. So, as the Septuagint translated, it's giant, and then you have hero or mighty man, warrior to champion to man of power to potentate, which are all like different forms. But this is, in my opinion, important to understand who Nimrod is. We'll get to that here in a second. But beginning to be mighty, verse 8 tells us that Nimrod began to be mighty. It makes little sense in this context. The NRSV translate, he was the first on earth to become a mighty warrior. So we start to see like, after the flood, Nimrod is the first to begin to become something mighty within war, suggesting a role from him similar to Jubal, or Tubal-Cain, fathers of all herders, musicians, and metalworkers in Genesis 4:20 through 22, namely the originators of these professions. The idea of his being the founder of some professions works even better with the opening of the next verse, which describes him as a mighty hunter, perhaps making him the first hunter. which is in line with some of what we read earlier, that God allowed man to eat now of animals instead of just vegetation, which, take that or leave it. This Nimrod, the mighty hunter before Yahweh, is never mentioned elsewhere in the Bible. The anecdote then shifts from describing Nimrod as a hunter to king. We know of no ancient Mesopotamian, so I jump a lot of content here just to give context, but and in the website, I highly suggest going there and reading it, because it's an interesting expository on Nimrod. Hopefully that's the right word. We know of no ancient Mesopotamian figure, mythic or historical, named Nimrod. Thus, scholars have struggled to identify who the biblical authors are describing. The next is, thus some scholars have suggested that Nimrod is based on a legendary god or demigod, such as the Sumerian gods Ninurta or Nergal, or the Babylonian Marduk, all of whom were renowned as great hunters, which the biblical version humanized. Others have equated Nimrod with legendary Mesopotamian heroes such as Gilgamesh. Spicer, however, correctly notes that despite the epic aspect of the biblical story, there is no textual evidence of Nimrod's being anything other than mortal. Okay, moving on to Chabad, and I'll hit what I think about that here in a second. However, the Chabad.org kind of does it in more story format, so it's hard to grab like context points. But Nimrod, being the son of Ham, received preferential treatment from his father. Now, in this, it refers to the clothing that God created for Adam and Eve. Excuse me. Somehow had a magical property. So it was stolen from great-grandpa Noah by Grandpa Ham. Like I said, it's story style, so if you look up at Chabad.org, it's going to reference it in story. But since I was his favorite, he entrusted them to me. So we see that Nimrod was preferred by Ham over all the other siblings, and was given this cloak of power, essentially. What's before the Lord? It's kind of like saying in the whole wide world in Bible talk. Now, we're going to get to that here in a second, in my opinion. That's one way of looking at it. You've all heard rotten things about me, but ironically, I started out as a devoted religious person. We began building a tower that was supposed to reach the heavens, effectively enforcing our takeover. Okay. So, I didn't spend a whole lot of time going into what I think of these two things, but there's the possibility of a ruling man and a possibility of a god. I think there's a combination of both. I think this is kind of a false dichotomy to think of it like this. There's a possibility that the man was related to a demigod or being a god, kind of like the Egyptian pharaohs were considered gods of their time. One of the primary things is that Nimrod, the word, means rebel. So I could see that there was an individual that was a rebel against God. He was a great man, a great warrior, which, if we remember the chapter before this, God had basically explicitly said not to shed the blood of your, brothers or, humankind. So he was going against God. Now, there's also another way, and I kind of agree with the possibility of a god, because some of the Sumerian gods were quite brutal in warfare, but they are also some of them were considered hunters, great hunters. And then we see a reference, to here Gilgamesh, which the story of Gilgamesh, interesting myth. It's interesting read, in my opinion, but that's the and then the Babylonian Marduk, which is important because Marduk later on, if I'm not mistaken, is kind of like a predecessor to the. I'm kind of speaking off the cuff, so bear with me here. There is a god later on that desires the blood of infants. But we'll get to that here, in future chapters. So there is a possibility that Nimrod was a man that was possibly attributed to a god, such as I have them written down here, like Anu, Elilu, Sin, which is actually one of the gods of Sumerians. I'm not going to get into that much because it'd probably take me a whole another month to get all the information on that. So I'm just going to pause here at Nimrod, which is kind of a disservice, I think, in my opinion. But anyways, take it or leave it. Nimrod could have been a rebelling individual who was a great hunter, a great warrior, possibly favored by Ham, we see cloaks given in the future, but there is no reference to it in at least this biblical recounting. But just know that is their concept within the Chabad.org. So the last thing I have to say is Babel is an interesting concept that we'll get to in next chapter, and I'll probably talk more on that. So enough of my slides, my commentary. We'll get to Rashi's. So Tiras here, this is Persia. So we one thing to mention, Magog here is in reference to Magog and Gog, or Gog and Magog. However, Magog and Gog are not connected chronologically in the sense of like Magog and Gog were together, but these two individuals are related. This is the Magog of Gog and Magog. And Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be a mighty man in the land. He began to be a mighty man. He caused the entire world to rebel against the Holy One. Like I said, this word here means rebel, or rebel, rebel, against the Holy One, blessed be he, with a plan of the generation of dispersion. So Nimrod here, this person / potential demigod / god. One of the reasons I do agree that it's possibly a god is because, not discounting the fact that he's a man, but referencing also a god, is it's a mindset. It's rebellion. So Nimrod is referencing rebellion against God, against the Holy One. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord, therefore it is said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. A mighty hunter, he ensnared people's minds with speech and misled them to rebel against the omnipresent. So we see here, even Rashi's kind of agreeing with, or I'm kind of agreeing technically with Rashi, he wrote this well before me, that this mighty hunter portion may be referencing a capturing of the mind, which we can see nowadays. There are individuals that are mighty hunters of the mind, attempting to capture, to ensnare people's minds and speech. So this is something that hasn't, gone away. Before the Lord, he intended to provoke him to his face. So let's get to what I was saying before this. Before the Lord, there are a couple different ways to read this. One is physical, so like he's physically on the land. God is observing him on the land. There is also like when Israelites erected statues or erected gods, the actual idols, it says before the Lord. So it's almost like in my opinion, it's more linked to this rebellious mindset. It's like rebelling before the Lord. I'm not doing this one justice, but hopefully you're getting what I'm trying to say. That this can be interpreted several different ways. I'm going out on a limb because the name Nimrod means rebel. That this is like God is there and he is judging this rebel in an active sense. Therefore it is said, about any man who is brazenly wicked, who recognizes his master and intends to rebel against him, it is said, this one is like Nimrod, a mighty hunter. Right. Feather in that hat, in my opinion, this small excerpt may be talking about a individual, but it is also referring, in my opinion, to an individual that may be representative of a god, kind of like the Egyptian pharaohs, in which this person went against God in spirit and rebelled. Now we have Ashur. If we go back to this here, Assyria. So we have the Assyrians, we have the Babylonians, and the Hittites, and all of this here is, all of this here is recorded in this text. It may not actually be the names that in that time period. That's the words that they would use. However, we can begin to see that there is connection between historic events, those that are told by history and our excavations and everything, to the biblical. It's just the names may not be exactly how they were used in that time period. If that makes any sense at all, because once we get to Babel, there is a confusion of language, which I think is what causes the reason why we look back and we're like, well, this person didn't exist. It's like, well, I think there is a disconnect between the words here. Anyways, so from that land, from Ashur, since Ashur saw his sons obeying Nimrod and rebelling against the Omnipresent by building the tower, he departed from their midst. This is where I guess it's trying to say that Ashur and Nimrod, so Nimrod begetting Babylon and Ashur, Assyria, in my estimation. And then you have the great city of Nineveh, as it is said, Jonah 3:3. Now Nineveh was an exceedingly great city to God. And Mizraim begot the Ludim and the Anamim. So Lehabim, which is this next part, whose faces were like flames, which is a very interesting concept. I would assume that's probably trying to reference maybe the shade of their faces. I'm not sure. And the Parthrusim and the Casluhim, from whom the Philistines emerged. So we see now where the Philistines come from. So let's back up here just a second. And also one piece of this is that Shinar is a land that is in a valley. So when we think of the Tower of Babel, we think it on this plain. It's technically down in a valley of an area. So sorry to backtrack there for a second. So from this land of Babylon arose these things, which is the Philistines. And then there was the scattering. And afterwards, the families of the Canaanites were scattered. So this is where we get the Canaanites, which I do believe, if I have this correctly, come over here on the western side. These are sons of Ham according to their families and their tongues and their lands and their nation. According to their tongues and their lands, although they were divided into tongues and lands, they are all sons of Ham. So we haven't even left the sons of Ham. So Ham had quite a few sons. If the text is correct from 9 about what Ham did to his father, it's kind of sad that he went on to, have such a family lineage. But let me see here. Yeah. Quite a few individuals. Anyways, and to Shem. We finally get to Shem here. This is after all of Ham's lineage. So, sorry, got distracted there for a second. Of the river, so the father of all people of the other side of the river, the brother of the Japheth elder. So we see a separation by river between Shem's family and Japheth's family. I do not know from the wording of the verse whether Japheth is the elder or Shem. The verse may be rendered the elder brother of Japheth, when Scripture says Shem was 100 years old. 2 years after the flood, you must say that Japheth was the elder because Noah was 500 years old when he first had children, and the flood came to pass in 600th year. Consequently, the eldest son was 100 years old at the time of the flood, and Shem did not reach the age of 100 until 2 years after the flood. So he's trying to say that, there's a little bit of misunderstanding of whether Shem and Japheth are, which one's older. The brother of Japheth, but not the brother of Ham, for these two honored their father. So he's saying here the brother of Japheth, the elder, is almost as if they exiled Ham as a brother for disgracing the father. And to Eber was born 2 sons, was named Peleg, because in his days the earth was divided, and the name of his brother was Joktan. The tongues became confused. So this here, we're seeing throughout this text almost a preemptive, hey, these are the generations, and we're seeing a little bit of what's going to happen in the next coming chapters here. Because the division, this confusion, was what scattered the people from the Tower of Babel. We learned that Eber was a prophet since he named his son for a future event. We learned Cedar Olam, that at the end of his Peleg's days, they were dispersed. For if you say that they were dispersed at the beginning of the days, behold, his brother Joktan was his junior, and he begot many families before that, as it is said, and Joktan begot, etc., and only afterwards. And the whole earth was one language. Now, if you say that they were dispersed in the middle of this Peleg's day, this is not so, because Scripture does not come to make things obscure, but to explain. Hence you learn that in the year of Peleg's death, they were dispersed. I guess this is just simply to say that this individual, that during that time period was the division. So Peleg dies during that. And then Joktan, because he was humble and considered himself small, therefore he merited to raise all these families. So it's saying that culturally, Joktan was a respectful individual because he considered himself lesser. Okay. I guess I'll finish this off with this. And Hazarmaveth. So Joktan begot Almadad and Shalef and Hazarmaveth and Jerah. This Hazar, lit yard of death, graveyard. He was so called because of his place. These are the words of the Aggadah. So apparently this individual has something to do with graveyards here. Anyways, much more than you would expect out of genealogy. However, it is important to get familiar with this information. There's so much more to what's going on here than what I have kind of tried to understand myself, just so that I understand the premise here. But each one of these individuals are important to understand the timeline of what is to come. And that's why we're getting this genealogy, or the generations of the sons of Noah. So, thank you for listening in. Hopefully some of this will help, or maybe it will confuse, I guess. But I pray this blesses you. Continue to get into the Word and find more out about this stuff. If I've misspoken, please let me know in the comments, and I'll try to make adjustments. This is And Why, the Bible reading series, and I hope you have a good one until next time.